men. Some people like them, some people don't. And it seems like most don't, but even so, I do, and some do. So for today's video, I will be the voice for all husbando lovers out there, and I will express our frustrations with the lack of men in not only gacha games, but in specific, Genshin Impact. So why do people like me actually want male characters? I feel like a lot of people who want to see men in gacha games simply want to see characters that are like them, in the same way that children know nothing about the history of race, gender, sexual orientation, or any other identity, want to see people who share their same identity. Typically, a lot of men like to see characters that share the same gender as them. Not only that, but people just like to see characters with masculine traits, like being jacked and bulky, or more traditional abstract traits like strength, courage, independence, leadership, and assertiveness. Now, before anybody goes to the comments, I'm not saying that these abstract traits are exclusive to men and that female characters having these traits is weird or wrong in any way. I understand that masculinity and femininity are social constructs based on sociology, aka cultural behaviors and beliefs, but I just think that the majority of people would like to see at least some male characters that align with this traditionally masculine traits, considering that the majority of male characters don't seem to have these male traits, while the majority of female characters either have these masculine traits or feminine traits as well. So what I'm trying to say is that having at least some male characters that look and act similar to how men are typically represented in current media and even historical mythology would be nice to see once in a while. Anyways, for an example of what I'm trying to say that we as husbando lovers want is Xbalanque in the Natlin lore. Xbalanque, at least in the lore, had masculine traits like leadership, wisdom, honor, and righteousness. We even saw murals and paintings of him that showcased him as having a masculine build. So obviously, the devs had to butcher it all by not releasing him and turning him into a jokester child in MiHoYo's story quest, which, don't get me wrong, I did find the contrast between his actual personality versus his perceived personality kinda wholesome and unique, which made it so that I wouldn't have even minded if he didn't turn out to be your typical charismatic male character that gave a lot more of a young adult vibe than an actual male adult vibe that a typical masculine character would typically have, even if he was playable. But still, it doesn't change the fact that we still haven't gotten a typical masculine character in ages, with the only characters coming to mind being Ryosli, Ito, Zhongli, and Yuvilette. And even then, 3 out of those 4 examples still have what we in the community like to call as noodle arms, where the playable model doesn't resemble the actual character's physique at all. Some other examples of what we'd want to see in Genshin come from a similar genre like shonen anime or Marvel/DC comics and movies. Though there are a lot of popular female characters that a lot of people gravitate to, the majority of characters in these anime and comics are males because the target demographic, aka men or boys, like male characters. Characters like Naruto, Sasuke, Ichigo, Deku, Goku, Vegeta, Luffy, Gojo, Sukuna, Sung Jin Woo for anime, and Batman, Superman, and Spider-Man for comics are all highly recognizable characters that have become extremely memorable, popular, and influential while all being men. If we look at Genshin's demographic, it seems to be split between males and females, with males being around 60% of the demographic. Now, considering that Gacha Games demographics are also filled with people who want to sexualize characters, aka gooners, there is a nuance to this demographic, meaning that you can't for sure say that just because there are a lot of males playing Genshin that the majority of players would want to see men. Love and Deep Space, or LADS, is a prime example of this demographic. The game is filled with over-sexualized male characters because that's what the demographic wants. Their demographic, of course, being majority females who want to see men simply because they are gooners. Same thing applies with Genshin. Although there are a majority of men, all that means is that technically there is a chance that there are more gooners who want females instead of males simply because they want to sexualize them. Of course, that shouldn't undermine the fact that there are still 40% of women who want to see men because chances are they themselves are gooners too. But it is definitely grounds to say that there should be more female characters than male characters, which honestly I think is fine. Nobody's saying that there shouldn't be more female characters than males because chances are that isn't what they actually want, nor what they actually expect, simply because they know that that will never happen, considering the ratio of male to female gooners in the demographic. But females being more desired than males doesn't mean that there shouldn't also be any male characters either. All it means is that there should be a proportional ratio of male to female characters based on the ratio of male to female gooners in the demographic. Now Now there's a certain group of people, probably the male gooners and the female enjoyers, who come up with rhetorics that rebut everything that I've said up to this point. Rhetorics like quality women always sell more, or companies will never release quality men. When it comes to the notion that quality women always sell more, I'm pretty sure if we go back and look at the sales, yes, typically women do in fact always sell more, but that's simply because of this favoring context, like quality men not actually being quality because they're twink models, or quality men being released in the early days, or quality men being released right before a big push character, aka typically a super duper uber quality woman. If we go back and look at how much the average woman sells versus the average man, we can actually see that they are fairly on par with each other. Examples of this include Navia and Nailu selling as much as Ryosli and the worst Archon in the game, Venti, or Kenichi and Raiden selling as much as Moalani and Kazuha pre-Cylonen release, or Nailu and Albedo selling as much as Sino and Venti. Now obviously the early days of Genshin were an exception, but nowadays the average man is proven to sell just as much as the average woman. The only reason quality men typically don't is because typically quality men don't have the same amount of quality as quality women. However, quality men who have actually had the same amount of quality as quality women have actually outsold quality women in some cases. For example, Wanderer's release alongside Ito made around $117 million, while Arlecchino alongside Lini, Nuvilette, aka the best DPS at that time, and Kazuha, aka the best support at that time, only made around 119 million. Keep in mind that these numbers are our estimates, for the source that I'm using has clearly expressed that their analysis isn't actually factual, but rather an estimate made by certain indicators. Not only that, but I myself will be taking liberties on how to interpret these analytics based on certain indicators like the time of a banner's release. For most banners, make the majority of their money in the first couple of days, but then end up doubling those numbers throughout the rest of the banner's duration. But again, this is only an estimate based on an analysis that also estimates. Regardless, I believe that this comparison between Wanderer and Ito with Arlecchino, Lini, Nuvilette, and Kazuha clearly shows that quality men can definitely sell as much as quality women, and can sometimes actually sell more, since even though Arlecchino did make more than Wanderer, keep in mind that Wanderer is a twink, aka a model which typically isn't favored by neither females nor males. Not only that, but Arlecchino had 2 whole powerhouses during that month's revenue. Anyways, when it comes to the rhetoric that Hoyo will never release quality men, that's just straight up wrong. HSR already released Feinin, Anaxa, and Medei this year, and Blade, Dan Heng, and Bebrelune, Jinjuan, Sunday, and Aventurine all have a clearly visible, passionate, and dedicated fanbase. Aventurine sold $100 million when paired up with Jingliu, who at that time had fallen off because of Acheron being released a couple weeks before her rerun, and who herself only sold 40 million. Jinjuan made 80 million compared to Seal, who only made 20 million. Blade and Wosha made 40 million, while Kafka only made 49 million a couple of days after her with Dan Heng, and that was with the first days of Dan Heng's banner, which again is typically when sales are the highest. Sunday and the first days of Fuge made only 50 million, while the rest of Fuge's days combined with the Herdas sales only made 50 million, which shows that either Fuge made 50 million by herself throughout her banner's duration, or that Sunday did the majority of those 50 million during his release, and the Herda did the majority of the other 50 million during her release, with Fuge making only around 20 million or so, compared to Sunday making 40 million and the Herda making 40 million, which again, I feel like is a pretty relative comparison, since Sunday and the Herda are both extremely hyped characters, with one being male and one being female, and yet, again, chances are they actually made the same amounts. Now, Medei did only make 29 million compared to Tribi, but who's a child, which, similar to the twink models, nobody actually likes. But, considering that this child is the best support DPS, it actually makes sense for why she would make 46 million. But again, the only reason this was the case was because Medei was being put one phase before Castris, a high in quality female who made 102 million during the anniversary top-up resets spending events. Not to mention, this character was very obviously forced down everyone's throats for no apparent reason. Yes, she was important to the plot, but so was every other Crisis heir, so she really didn't deserve so much more promotion and quality quality compared to the other characters, which honestly reminds me of the Firefly situation. Both of these characters, although important, weren't that important relative to other characters, which makes me think that obviously these two characters feel like some type of industry plants that nobody actually cared about, but because of how high they were in quality, everyone was tempted to summon on them. Not to mention they're also broken in meta, which is why again Tribi and probably Sunday as well, but also the Herda sold so much since HSR has been under power creep phase, I guess. But regardless, when it comes to Anaxa, the month for his banner included the first couple of days for the Herda and Hyacine, the best DPS and the best sustainer. So I wouldn't be surprised if these numbers that I'm about to give were highly skewed, considering his ultimate animation was the only thing that the devs actually cared to put any effort into, since Castris got all of the budget, just maybe because he's a man. Regardless, during his month of release, HSR made $50 million, which is above average for any typical character, independent of gender, which is why I believe that these numbers are skewed in favor towards the Herda and Hyacine. Not to mention, these $50 million did come after the $100 million of Castris, meaning that chances are everyone had already spent their hard-earned money on Castris and barely had any money to spend on Anaxa, the Herda, and Hyacine. When it comes to Phaenon's sales, we haven't gotten them as of yet, but considering that Cypher, Aglaya, the Herda, and Hyacine last month barely got any sales, and Phaenon is being released with the Fate collab as well as Sunday and Tribi, aka two of the best supports in HSR, we can expect an unbelievable amount of sales. But we can't also expect all of that money to go into Phaenon, which is why chances are these sales won't really be an indicator that men actually sell to the male haters nor to the HSR devs. Regardless, it would be disingenuous to say that Phaenon will carry these sales, but also disingenuous to say that Phaenon isn't going to be a major part of these sales, since many people who don't even care about HSR anymore came back just to watch Phaenon's trailers, which shows just how much anticipation and hype this man has. Quick little edit here, it seems I took a bit too long to make this video since Phaenon's banner sales have finally come out. Phaenon, alongside Tribi, Sunday, and the Fate collab, only made 91 million, which is honestly pretty small in comparison to Castris, who made 102 million, and the first half of Acheron with all of Sparkle, who made 140 million. If I'm being honest, the only reason I'm assuming that this number is so low in comparison is because people have been knowing about the Fate collab, were highly anticipating Phaenon even before his release, and the majority of people already had Tribi and Sunday since they already knew they were broken. In short, I'm pretty lost, since again, these sales can't really be attributed solely to Phaenon. Thus, these sales don't really prove that men do or don't sell, but it's still kind of odd how every other character during this month didn't carry the sales. Regardless, it's obvious to me that men do in fact sell as much as women when given the same quality as them. Not to mention, HSR has been releasing men pretty consistently and at a high quality as well, so to try and shut down a male wants versus please by denying the mere possibility through doom posting is just straight up wrong, especially because as of the making of this video, the Notcry trailer just dropped, showcasing up to 2 male characters and 1 boy character, which in my opinion is completely fine, since I believe that the boy/twink model definitely fits Durrance's character. Thus, it seems like HoYoverse has finally started to hear us male wants versus please, which shows that as long as we keep asking, they will deliver. Regardless, if you'd enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe if you haven't yet, I would greatly appreciate it. Goodbye.